You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by HomeField Apparel. And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 318th edition of Assembly Call Radio and our 987th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of December 7th, 2023. I am your host, Jared Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call, how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion. Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
Well, this week's banner moment occurred on Tuesday night when Mackenzie Mbako stepped up to the free throw line with 5 seconds remaining and Indiana clinging to a 1-point lead. The Indiana freshman had not played much down the stretch, with Mike Woodson preferring other players for their defense and ball handling, but when an obvious fouling situation presented itself, Woody opted to get the ball into the hands of the one player on his team who has yet to miss a free throw all season long. Cold off the bench or not, first true conference road game of his career or not. You know what happened from there. Swish, swish. His 16th and 17th free throws in a row, neither even coming close to hitting the rim. It was one of the surest signs yet that the five-star freshman has the confidence and skill it will take to provide the wing scoring this team has sorely lacked. While much has been made of the excellent interior contributions made by Khalil Ware and Malik Renu, and rightfully so, and while much angst has been registered regarding the struggles of IU's backcourt to consistently produce, and rightfully so, the importance of Mbako's recent emergence has been an underrated element of Indiana's improvement. The Hoosiers underperformed analytical expectations in each of their first 5 games. Meanwhile, Mbako averaged just 5.0 points per game during that stretch. In the 3 games since, Mbako has averaged 14 points per game, and Indiana has outperformed expectations in each one. That's not a coincidence, and it's not just scoring. Mbako has helped Indiana improve its rebounding, grabbing 6.3 boards per game over the last 3, and there is still plenty of room to grow. Mackenzie is just 4 of 22 from deep on the season, but he has made 1 3 in each of his last 3 games while shooting 33.3%. His accuracy on mid-range twos and free throws and the purity of his shooting mechanics suggest improvement from deep is on the way. There were at least 3, if not more, clean three-point attempts that Mbako passed up against Michigan. As he gets more comfortable, those are shots he'll start taking and making, and the offense will be more efficient because of it. Now look, I wouldn't expect linear improvement from Mbako from here on out. He'll have steps forward and steps back. All freshmen do. But his ability to bounce back so quickly from his poor start to the season, both on and off the court, and the immense confidence and skill he brings to the table are enough to make any IU fan optimistic that he can be a key piece in IU balancing out its offensive attack as the season moves along. If that happens, Indiana will continue to rack up the wins, and Mackenzie may find himself back on the NBA's one-and-done radar. All right, now let me introduce my co-host this week. Ryan is off. Make sure that you go to The Big Lead. Check out their annual Sports Media Awards piece. It has been a labor of love, loathing, and late nights for Ryan, so I know he'd appreciate the support and any shares you can give to that article. Again, you can find it at thebiglead.com. But here with me, ladies and gentlemen, he is the Kurt Signetti of Girls Youth Sports Coaching in Cincinnati, the president emeritus of the Robert Johnson Fan Club, and one of the world's most renowned bracketologists.
The best of youth sports coaching, you know that we got 'em. When it comes to analytic trends, you know he can spot 'em. For first-class bracketology, if you want the top, you gotta go bottoms. If you want the top, you gotta go bottoms. If you want the top,
Andy, whenever I host an episode of AC Radio with you and I get to play that song, I'm singing it for the rest of the night. Like, without fail, You want the top, you got to go bottoms. Anyway, what's your bottoms line on the last week in IU basketball?
The big thing is I use 2-0 in Big Ten play, and I think we've seen a lot of improvement from the team in the last few games. I think what you would expect with a team with so many new pieces, but it feels like things are starting to fall into play or into place a little bit. And look back, really the 10 seasons prior to this one, IU had only started 2-0 in Big Ten play twice. Now those 2 seasons went in incredibly different directions. One of them was in 2016 and the other was in 2020. 2019 actually. So you had one that you got off and you won the Big Ten title, and then you had another one where you went 1-11 or 1-12 over a series of games. So remains to be seen which of those paths this season is going to take. Probably somewhere in the middle. But one of the things I remarked to you guys, kind of sitting back after the fact on I guess it was Wednesday morning, was, and I tried to allude to this on the show. It was just, it really seems like Woodson has a good handle on the right buttons to push, both individually and collectively, with this team right now. Now that may change, and we may be a few games from now, it's like, what is this guy doing? All those kinds of things. But for now, we talked so much about how important that timeout was he took and when he took it and how they responded to that. You look at what he's done with Khalil Ware over the course of the season. And I think even he said, I saw something he said today, like, those questions from his days at Oregon are behind him at this point, and that's kind of gone. And the way that he handled some of the questions about Mbako early in the season of, you just got to be patient. And we've started to see him come around. And even some of the ways he talked about, Trey after the game and some of those things, and I think that was believed to be one of his strengths coming in, right? Was how he could build relationships with players. We saw that with Trace. We saw that with a number of guys over his brief tenure so far, but continue to be impressed with that. You can probably have some qualms with the X's and O's here and there. I think Coach will probably allude to this, but some things that he said that made it one of Woodson's better coaching performances. So, you can nitpick some things here and there, but seems like in a somewhat challenging situation with trying to integrate all these new pieces, that he's kind of got them on a good path right now. And that's the part that's exciting. It's, we can get hung up in net rankings and some of this other stuff and how they've played against some of the worst teams and all those kinds of things. And those are all valid things to talk about, but it at least seems like, while it wasn't pretty at times, things are moving in a positive direction. Things are starting to come together. And so that's what's exciting as you head into this. And the next 2 games are both really important. The 2 best non-conference games left. And those will take on some importance that we'll talk about later. But, feel good at least about the mindset and just even seeing some of the interactions with the guys, the 3 come out while people are getting interviewed and they're holding up their phones and seeing, Khalil Ware, Peyton Sparks, Anthony Walker out doing that. Just seems like they're getting along well. Now winning certainly has a lot to do with that, but seems like things are starting to come together. It's probably the biggest thing for me over the last week.
Yep. And also here with us this week, he is a longtime high school basketball coach in the state of Indiana, the founder of Delphi Bracketology, and a man who knows how to celebrate a road win in your rival's gym.
Shavito!
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the coach.
He remembers the days when a movie cost $1. Heaven help you if you ever decide to pop your collar. Play hard, but remember, fake hustle is a crime. He's the coach and it's Tonsoni time.
How much did a movie cost when you were growing up? Is that
$1 in high school? We had $1 movie theater. They took my dates to $1 in LaPorte.
Are you implying that Bob Thompson did not do extensive research when writing the lyrics to that song?
We had $1.
We had $1.
I'm offended
they
for
were
Bob. That seems unnecessary to question that.
They were late run movies, but still $1 movie theater. So
very nice. Yeah, very nice. Well, Coach, it is Tonsoni time. What's on your mind this week?
I can echo a lot of what Andy said. That Indiana's 7-1, and if you would have told me that they would have been 7-1 and lost to UConn, that wouldn't have been surprising. So the record is where it's at, and Andy mentioned that some of the ways they've won has not been pretty, and that is reality. So I kind of been going back and forth, feeling really pleased, and then like, whoa, this team is not quite where I expected it to be. But a couple things really on the positive side for me. You won 2 Big Ten games. It's always good to win your conference opener. It's always good to get wins on the road, always difficult. And Indiana did it without their 6-year veteran point guard. So you have a backup point guard in Gabe Cupps who is ready to play college basketball, but maybe not play 32 minutes and score and defend and do all that. He's got to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that while he's learning the game, and Indiana still won. That is a really, really good sign. And as you both have said in your opening comments, things are pointing in the right direction. You have C.J. Gunn having a game now that we can look at. Caleb Banks, when he was in New York, had a game, and then he's backed that up with some good performances. So the trends are moving up. Then the reality sets back in for me is like it's got to really keep moving up fast. It can't just be happy with that because Auburn is important. Kansas is important. And with the Big Ten not looking so good, the opportunities to get good quality wins, to get into the tournament, and then maybe get a seed that you want in the tournament are not as ripe as it was last year. So there is some immediate importance coming up, as we'll talk here in a little bit. But it was a really solid week. Maryland was picked anywhere from 3rd to 6th or something, thought they'd be a lot better, and you spanked them. We're up 20 until you took your foot off the brake. And then to go on the road at Michigan and really no X, no Trey, and no Renu at their levels of performance in the first half, and yet you found pieces. So the trend is up, but, boy, we need to put the pedal to the metal in the improvement to win some of these bigger games.
Yeah, hold that thought. We're going to talk about the importance of these next 2 games coming up here soon. That'll be part of Hoosier Headlines here in segment 1. Then in segment 2, we have a special treat. We're going to do an IU-Auburn preview, and we are lucky enough in our audience to have a lifetime IU fan who also works at Auburn as a professor. James Hansen is here. He's going to give us some insight on Auburn, a team he knows very well, and obviously he knows both of these teams well, so he understands the matchup. So he's going to join us in segment 2. That'll be fun. And then we got a bunch of good questions from our Substack subscribers in our mailbag, which we'll hit in segment 3. All of that coming this week on Assembly Call Radio. But first, let's talk about our presenting sponsor.
HomeField Apparel, wear one for the team.
This edition of Assembly Call Radio, just like all shows on the Back Home Network, presented by our friends at HomeField Apparel, where they have the largest collection of vintage IU apparel that you will find anywhere. And it is December 7th, so you have, 17, 18 days left of shopping until Christmas Day. Go to homefieldapparel.com. You can knock out most people on your list because it's not just Indiana that they have, but they have over 150 colleges and universities where they've pulled out these incredible logos from their past. Each sales page tells the story of the logo, which is really neat. And they're printed on comfortable fabrics. They last through many washings. And even if you have someone on your list who isn't a big college sports fan or has no affiliation with a school, just go to their core collection and buy them a nice hoodie, with a beautiful color, or a t-shirt, something like that. They literally do have something for everybody. And if you pay attention, they have deals all the time. Just today, they alerted everybody to a 20% off deal. If you shop with the app, use the promo code app. I don't even know if it's still going. But that's why you want to follow them on Twitter, subscribe to their text updates, subscribe to their email list, because there's always little opportunities to save. If you don't see any of those little opportunities, then use our promo code HOME23 because it will ensure that you get 15% off your first order. That's promo code HOME23. So go to homefieldapparel.com, pick up stuff for yourself and everybody on your Christmas list, and make sure that you save money when you do it. It's homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. All righty. So just a few headlines this week. Obviously, in the season, most of the headlines have to do with the games, which we do our post-game shows for, so no need to recap those here. But there is, some interesting recruiting news. Good vibes right now as it stands with Derek Queen. There has been nothing official, but, a decent amount of chatter that Indiana's in a really good spot. It certainly doesn't hurt that Derek postponed his announcement, and Indiana has played very well and waxed Maryland, and Maryland has not played very well. And certainly it helps when you're recruiting a big man when your 2 big men are flourishing. So a lot of things seem to be working in Indiana's direction there. If we find out anything about a decision date, something like that, we will, of course, let you know. The other big recruiting news to keep an eye on is the amount of visitors coming to the Kansas game. I saw today from several different sources, Jason Sanan. I don't know exactly how to pronounce his name. I should have checked that before the show, so I apologize to him. But he is a 5-star prospect in the class of 2025 that a lot of people expect to move into the 2024 class. Indiana is in with him. Bryson Tiller is another member, I think, of the 26 class, and there are a whole bunch of other guys, like I think Malachi Moreno and some other really highly regarded prospects that Indiana has been spending a lot of time on over the last 6 to 12 months. A lot of those people expected to be at the Kansas game, which is, smart visit scheduling because that atmosphere is going to be incredible. So that's the latest on recruiting. We'll continue to just update you throughout the season as we hear little tidbits. The next thing I want to talk about, guys, here for the rest of segment 1 is, Coach, something that you alluded to, which is, Indiana's kind of lagging computer rankings. The Hoosiers are 7-1 overall, 2-0 in conference play. That is an excellent record. Unfortunately, right now the analytics don't like Indiana as much, in part because Indiana started out low in a lot of the analytics just because of replacing so many new people. And when there's a lot of roster turnover, sometimes with the computers, that leads to some uncertainty, and you get dinged a little bit because of it. And frankly, Indiana just underperformed expectations early. Closer games than expected against Florida Gulf Coast, Army, Wright State. Those will hurt your rankings. So Indiana currently 65th in KenPom, 103 in the net. It's just a data point as of December 7th. There is still plenty of time for those to change and Indiana to improve them and for the preseason priors to cycle out, all of that stuff. But the thing that fans do need to pay attention to is the fact that Indiana isn't the only Big Ten team with struggling. Now, Indiana has won. Other Big Ten teams have taken losses, and their analytics are even lower. And what that does, Coach, and you and Andy can speak to this, is it really makes these next 2 non-conference games huge for Indiana against Auburn and Kansas, maybe even more important than we thought, because the opportunities to get big, impressive wins in Big Ten play isn't going to be there because a lot of the Big Ten teams haven't done much to build their resume. And so when that happens, you're just kind of exchanging wins or losses with lower regarded conference teams. That doesn't give you as much of an opportunity to build your resume in conference play, so you have to do it now. So can you speak to how that all works and why these next 2 games now are so essential?
Yeah, it's all about getting quality wins, and the net and the NCAA has this system of quads, and it's hard to explain, but based on where your opponents are on the net and where you play them, it falls into the quad system of 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you want to get quad 1 and 2 wins. But if the conference has struggled in the non-conference, that lowers everyone's analytics and net to places where in the past a team that you would expect to be a quad 1 is really a quad 2, and it's a nice win at home, but it's not what you really thought it would be. And that's just in the simplest terms, and maybe, Andy, you can feel free to jump in and add some things about that. But you really want your conference to do well in the non-conference, because if everything's elevated, then most of your games in conference are going to be quad 1 and quad 2. I think I counted before the Big Ten that there were 11 of the 20 games currently where I thought players were or teams were that could be quad 1 or 2 based on home or road, which is, I think, low for those number of opportunities to get those wins. So when you have a low conference number, that's what's happened to the ACC in getting 5 and 6 teams, and that's what's happened with the Pac-12 in a couple of years. They didn't do well in the non-conference, and so the conference games didn't they matter in standings and seeding for conference tournament. But as far as the NCAA selection, you got to get those quad 1s and 2s. If you remember back, Andy, I don't know what year it was, 17-16, Nebraska was 5th in the Big Ten with a 12-8 record in the Big Ten. And I think the Big Ten only got 4 teams in that year, or someone below Nebraska got in and Nebraska didn't. And it was just a lot of people couldn't understand how the 5th-place Big Ten team couldn't get in. I don't know if we're at that point quite yet. My memory with all the numbers and stuff, I'd have to go back and do some research, but that's what you don't want to happen. And seeing Iowa getting beat by 29 doesn't help the analytics. So when you beat Iowa, it should be better on the resume. A lot of times for that to work out, though, it is so early that there is no guarantee. Iowa could win 6 in a row and move up quite a bit by mid-January. So that's the way I see it. And so now Indiana needs to win these 2 games to protect and get an opportunity in that column.
And the other thing it does, Andy, is it gives you more opportunities for bad losses in conference play. If a lot of these teams are lower, then you go on the road and lose a tough game. Now it looks a little bit worse because it's like, gosh, that team is ranked 102nd or whatever it is.
Yeah, it all really, and what Coach brought up, you were actually spot on in the year in 2018. Only 4 Big Ten teams got in, and the Big Ten on KenPom that year was ranked 5th after all the major conference leagues except the Pac-12, and so only for the top 4 teams got in because after Nebraska at 13-5, everybody was 500 or lower. Now
13-5, and they didn't get in.
Yeah.
Now, some of that is the unbalanced schedule, and some of that was you had a lot of teams where if you amassed a ton of your wins against teams in the lower part of the league, those don't really move the needle, and that's kind of what ultimately the problem is. And so the Big Ten has done a really good job in recent years of performing well in the non-conference, and subsequently then almost any game that you play in the league against the top 2/3 of the league gives you a great opportunity for a win and won't really hurt you if you lose. Now, if you lose them all, that doesn't help. But the number of landmines that you had in the Big Ten, even if you go back to, last season, let's say, there weren't a ton of bad losses to really take. And last year was a little bit unique in the sense that you had so many teams that were between 9-11 and 12-8. You had almost the whole league fell within that couple range. But really, outside of taking a loss against Ohio State or Minnesota last year, you weren't really taking a terrible loss. So this year, IU, and it's pretty close with the Big 12 has really separated itself. But the SEC, I think, is second ranked on KenPom right now. Big 10 is 4th, I believe, behind the Big East as well. But what that's led to in recent years, the 2 conferences that Coach called out were perfect examples of the ACC and the Pac-12. And then the unbalanced schedule doesn't really help that. If there's only a few good wins to get and you don't play you don't get as many of those opportunities, you find those teams getting left out or in some trouble. And so the Big Ten's kind of running out of chances. They do still have a few major non-conference games left, even as early as this weekend, but they really haven't performed well, whether it was in tournament settings, in some of these other events, or even just in regular, non-conference matchups, whether that's the Gavitt games or different things like that. So they've really painted themselves into a corner. And as much as it probably pains us all to think about, you really want to root for the Big Ten teams to win some of these games so that you can kind of bolster the league just a little bit. Because what you have right now is Purdue and then a pretty big drop off. You got, I don't know that anybody else is even in the top 20 of, the net or KenPom, or even if you look at Torvik, the next best team behind Purdue right now, you drop all the way to 21st. I guess Michigan State's still 18th, and then you go to Wisconsin at 21. And you've got a bunch of teams in the 20s, but you just don't have as many of those, top end wins, and you've got some more at the bottom. So, these next 2 games, the other thing you look at is just what has IU done in the non-conference. They haven't done anything bad necessarily. Losing to UConn, there's no shame in that whatsoever. The challenge becomes, dependent upon how some of these other teams play, like they might not be the worst of the worst, but have you really picked up any key non-conference wins? Strength of schedule still remains to be seen what that'll look like, but you'd love to find a way to get one of them. If you get both, obviously that's outstanding, but you'd like to get one of them. So at least you have one non-conference win to kind of hang your hat on and say, hey, we tried to go out and schedule. We played UConn, we played Kansas, we played Auburn. So it's just a matter of trying to get, one of these next 2. The 3 after that, you should be able to kind of coast through, ideally pick up those wins and be ready for the rest of the Big Ten season, where you can pick up some more quality wins. But, Coach and I have both seen plenty of teams get punished a little bit from a seeding perspective, at the very least, for not really having any marquee non-conference wins, which is where IU would find itself if they don't win either of these next 2 games.
Another thing to just pay attention to, there's outliers early. Like the data is so raw that it's not worth really, other than it tells you some trends, as we've talked about, but then also will tell you which teams from these smaller conferences might just, make a push to be a non, automatic qualifier. Like FAU last year was so good that if they didn't win their conference tournament, they were probably going to get an automatic qualifier, which then lowers the number of bids to the bigger schools. So when you see these outliers, everyone gets mad. Well, how can Indiana State be up there, and how can Princeton? Well, they're not probably going to stay there. But those are teams you want to keep your eyes on because the Missouri Valley has not had more than one bid for a long, long time. But if they stay up there in the net and get some wins on the road, those are teams that can sneak in every once in a while. We've had 1 or 2 or 3 of those that have really made pushes. If they didn't win their conference tournaments, could be in there. That affects who gets selected too. And if the Big Ten has a lot of those teams towards the bubble because of their weak non-conference performance, those are the kinds of things we look at. That's why I like having the net out early, not to go ahead and put a bracket out necessarily, but to help our kids understand that, and then to look at teams and start identifying teams, who's playing well, who's not playing well, who needs to get better. That's really the main purpose and only purpose for me right now with the net. Even as a bracketologist, we're very patient in that.
A couple comments I wanted to bring up here from Charles. I think this echoes what a lot of people think. I could hardly care less about the analytics at this point. 7-1, 2-0 conference start, and those 2 wins a month ago seemed like pretty likely L's. I'll take the tangibles over the analytics. Hey, I'm with you. Winning and losing still matters. It's the most important thing outside of the college football playoff selection, obviously. But, our kind of what we're trying to do here is just give you an accurate view of the kind of the full 360-degree view of it, because as much as we may hate it or be annoyed by it, this stuff really does matter, and to Brian's point here, run the score up. Thank you, nerds. I mean, It does matter, I mean, Coach, can you speak to that just, quickly?
Yeah.
The efficiency margin matters.
It matters, and I actually think it's better than what it used to be, the RPI. I don't know where Andy stands on this, but where I get my information, warrennolan.com, they put out an RPI list and a net list. And when you go and compare the two, the net has teams that are better, higher in the top 20 and 30 than the RPI. The RPI has a lot more outliers. Because I do think it matters how you play the game of basketball. I have a huge problem that it's not capped. I don't like teams winning by 40 against weak opponents, having good your offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency are going to be great when you win by 40. And I'm not sure the formula is as perfect as it can be, but adding offense and defensive efficiency, I think, has made better a ranking system as the net is used for a data point for ranking and finding who the best teams are. I personally like it better than the RPI, but it's just that piece of it I don't necessarily agree with, because it's right. You've got to blow bad teams away to build that up. If you have a bunch of close games, and we're seeing it with Indiana, that's the difference. Andy, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at what you said at the end is what I was going to bring up. IU's got single-digit wins in those first few games against some of the worst teams on their schedule at this point. And I think in the end, Wright State's going to end up looking pretty good. But Army's not, and it doesn't seem like Florida Gulf Coast is going to be what people expected they might be early in the season. And so you look at a team like Iowa State, who's just blown the doors off a couple people. They're kind of the poster child for what that does. They're also doing the same thing to Iowa right now. So they're going to, skyrocket even more. And I tell you, if anything else, that's really when IU has these 3 games after Kansas, like, that's what you want to look for from IU. You want to win those handily and do that. Now, there's all kinds of reasons not to, take guys. You want to take guys out. You want to do. Coaches have approached it all different ways, but it certainly doesn't hurt you to put it on somebody when you can. And so that'll be interesting to see if IU can make up a little bit of that. But yeah, ultimately, the margins in those few games are a huge factor in where IU sits right now as you look at it. So be interesting to see how it works. But you still see now you've got huge fluctuations. You've got teams just because they didn't even play, somebody that they beat did something, or somebody they lost to did something, and they moved 10 spots. Like, that doesn't happen as you get further into the season, but it's all still pretty noisy right now, just given the lower volume of games.
Yeah. I also thought real quickly sometimes too, like, when do you stop fouling? Like, some of these coaches will foul, down 10, and they'll foul 3 or 4 times, and a 10-point loss becomes a 14-point loss. Like, they need to hire an analytic manager, and I agree with the comment, like, throw the analytics out. It's all about wins and losses. But, there's a point with 42 seconds. If you're down 7 or 8, is it better to lose by 7 and 8 or foul? And That's a tough question. I hate it from a coaching standpoint because that's not true basketball, but it does affect the scoring margins. Do affect it somewhat.
And the reality is, once you have more games under your belt, the wins and losses do matter a little bit more. You certainly still have the efficiency margin stuff, but if you keep winning games, that's ultimately what's going to push you up the rankings. Now, you can push yourself up faster by winning by a lot, but eventually
winning on the road too.
Yeah, eventually that stuff evens out. You win enough games, it'll take care of itself. It's just pretty noisy right now. IU's not the only example of a major conference team who's got a good record who's sitting outside the, around 100th in the net. It's just, it changes a lot. And I think they've largely settled on about a time when they will release it. But you've also seen, every year it's like, oh, this team's up here way toward the top. And then they end up so much lower than that. So you're going to see that this year, just like any other year. But I think the synopsis is IU would be well served to win one of these games. The Big Ten needs to play well in what remaining marquee games it has left. And you set yourself up for better chances to move up quicker.
Yep. All righty. Well, coming up here on Assembly Call Radio, let's look ahead to Saturday's big game against Auburn. And here to help us, as a man perfectly suited for such a conversation, a lifelong IU fan who just so happens to be a professor emeritus at Auburn. We will welcome him next. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. And there he is.
Hello, guys. How are you? Is my volume okay?
Yeah, no, you sound great.
Good. Andy, Coach, it's surreal meeting all you guys. I've been watching you for a long time.
It's awesome to have you here.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here.
Yeah, we appreciate it. And based on the quick bio that Jared gave us, we should probably be far more impressed to be in your presence than the other way around. But we appreciate it either way.
Yeah, Assembly Call still has not yet been nominated for a Pulitzer. Yeah, I don't know what we're doing wrong.
Someday. First Ryan shut us out of the Big Lead Awards, and now this. It's been a humbling week.
Do podcasts qualify for Emmy nominations, or is there a separate category for podcasts?
They probably do, but it's all the huge ones. It's all the
you guys.
Awards and all that.
I watched some other basketball podcasts, and this one's the best by far.
Well, we very much appreciate it.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Okay, so let's hop into this. I'll do our intro music, and we will get going here. All right. Yeah, I know. It does. It shows that Jim is muted, and it shows that Andy is muted, but both of them can talk.
Well, I actually did just mute myself a second ago, but I know
that was showing you as muted earlier, too.
I noticed the same thing.
Am I okay now? I don't know what happened.
Yeah, you're good now. I don't know. Something must be weird with the mute button on
I don't think I did that. But
yeah, no, you're good. It is all good. All right, here we go.
Hey, it's Romeo Langford. What's the only thing better than hitting a game winner to beat Wisconsin? Celebrate it with friends afterwards. Join Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on Assembly Call after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
Thank you, Romeo. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. I am Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and the coach, Brian Tonsoni, and we are very pleased to welcome to the Assembly Call stage tonight a longtime listener and subscriber to the show who has been an IU fan since 1962 when he attended an IU Notre Dame game featuring Jimmy Rail, Tom Bawyer, John McLaughlin, and the Van Arsdale twins. Many of you will be able to relate with this. He broke a vase in his mom's house when Kentucky beat us by a point in the 1975 regional final. And in the years since, he's become a professor emeritus of history at Auburn University, a historian for NASA, and the New York Times bestselling author of 14 books, including the only authorized biography of Neil Armstrong. Yes, Purdue's pride and joy trusted only a Hoosier to tell his story. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Assembly Call stage. Here to help us preview IU-Auburn, James R. Hansen.
Thank you very much, Jared.
Awesome to have you here.
Yeah, it's a delight to be here. And I've been watching Auburn since we moved to Auburn in 1986. And so it's been, what does that make, 37 years pretty much. And and there were a lot of lean years at Auburn. Back in Beard Eve Coliseum, they had to put tarps across the upper arena sections because they were empty. And we were so embarrassed by the poor attendance. I mean, there were certain games we'd only have 1,500, 2,000 people. And so to make it look like the arena wasn't so empty, they have to block off and disguise the upper sections. So it's changed a lot now because you can't even get into the Auburn Arena now, the new arena that's been in operation for 7 or 8 years. That's an unbelievable environment. I mean, I don't know if I'd want to suggest Indiana come down to play or not. It's a very tough place to play.
I mean, and say what you will about Bruce Pearl, the man brings enthusiasm to the program.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a completely. I mean, the reversal in the program is unbelievable. I mean, if you look at SEC championships or NCAA tournament appearances or number of players that get drafted and go into the NBA, I mean, it's been a massive turnaround. I mean, it was like almost from non-existent to really significant over the course of Bruce Pearl's time here. So he really knows how to work a crowd, and he knows how to work a campus. That's how it happened, because he would go to student organizations and faculty meetings and all kinds of things to try to get support for basketball, which just, Auburn had some awfully good teams over the years, but it's a football school, and now it's kind of a mix.
Kind of hoping Kurt Signetti can do the same thing at Indiana, turn a basketball school into a football school.
Well, let's hope so. Yeah, that's
be nice.
That looks interesting. Yeah.
All right, so we just set the stage for why this game is so important. Not that most fans didn't already know why this game is so important, but what can you tell us so far about this Auburn team? What are your impressions of them early in the season?
Well, the AU basketball team plays the modern style of ball that Ryan talks about all the time. As a historian, I'm real interested in chronological periodization, and I would actually say we're in a postmodern era of college basketball now. I think the modern period really maybe started in the late 80s and early 90s when the time clock came in, shot clock, and the 3-points. It changed the game a lot, and it's something beyond just modern at this point. I mean, the team, the way Pearl coaches the team, and it really takes on his personality, is he wants the players to really get up and down the court. I think the word that came to my mind when I started to think about this was attack. I mean, it's an attacking offense. It's an attacking defense. In fact, I had a nephew that played for Pearl at University of Southern Indiana, and when Pearl got the job here, I got a call from Brett, and Brett told me one word. He said, piranha. They're going to be playing like piranha, relentless. They tend to play a game of controlled chaos in a lot of respects. No one is afraid to shoot from just about anywhere. And that goes for the forwards and the center just as well as it does with the guards. There's lots of 3 attempts, which when the ball goes in, leads to some really big runs, some real blitzes. And even when the ball doesn't go in as well as they would like, and they don't get those blitzes, the number of threes that they take, and this is something, Jared, you talk a lot about in terms of added offensive efficiency or added value. When you're taking as many threes as Auburn takes, and if you shoot even 29-30%, which is what they're doing, that extra value comes in handy. 10 players play. And of course we have that many playing too, but when you watch the game Saturday, you study how the substitution patterns work, because with Auburn, it's almost as if they're playing in a multiverse, because there's no first team, second team. There's no bench starters. I mean, after a while, within a few, I mean, they obviously have to start 5 guys, but before you know it, there's a blend, there's a mix, and you don't know who's playing. It could be anybody. So he thinks, and he has said this in several different ways, that he believes that his 10 over 40 minutes can beat your 10, the way that he plays them. And so, these 10 players are not afraid to do whatever. I mean, they're not afraid to shoot the crazy shot, because he doesn't necessarily get benched after a while.
Yeah,
I can continue, but you could ask me a question too. I mean, I think the personality of Pearl is so crucial, and just like Woodson's personality, I think is becoming more and more important to to the IU team. But he's a very passionate man. He's very intense. He's very high tempo. He's spontaneous. The phrases that came to me thinking about him and the team are, let it fly, no fear, no hesitation. If you miss, don't worry about it. Get on the boards, keep the ball, hard drive, and alley-oop for the dunks. On defense, it's keep in front of the ball, crowd the shooter, get your fans screaming up to a deafening noise level, rebound and run out, and press on after shots, press until the offense, the opponent has the ball kind of stabilized and ready to cross the line. They don't press. Sometimes they'll press and to keep the press on the entire full court, but usually it's guarding the throw in, and then once that's been taken care of and kind of handled by the opposing team, then they usually come back and get into their half court set.
So
Jim, let's
go ahead, Coach.
Go ahead, and I was just going to say their defense inside. Is it going to be predicated on putting pressure on Indiana, making the guards turn the ball over so they don't get it into this inside, or do they have a chance of stopping our incredible front line? What do you think the strategy is going to be from Coach Pearl there? Do they have the numbers to stop us, or do they have to go after the guards and just hope the ball doesn't get inside?
Well, I think someone here in Auburn has written that Auburn has kind of a Noah Ark's team. They have two of everything. They have two centers. They have two good power forwards. They've got two good starting point guards. I think they can play pretty tough both ways. The guards are clearly going to put a lot of pressure on the ball. And I think Holloway, who's the freshman McDonald's All-American, who had a good start but then is struggling a little bit, both offensively and defensively, he's actually the second stringer. Trey Donaldson is getting, who's a former running back football player, who's a really good player. They can put a lot of pressure on the guards. So our guards are going to have their hands full. But with Johnny Broom, with Jalen Williams, and with their other starter, who has been Denver Jones, who's a transfer from Florida International, played 2 seasons there, and I think they can. It'll be interesting. And then they have a substitute center that's about 6'11", that comes in, and he's pretty much a defensive player, but he blocks a lot of shots. And I told Jared I could talk about what I think are the key matchups at some point in time. But I think it's going to be interesting because I think Auburn is I heard the Michigan assistant coach in his postgame the other night, maybe you guys heard this, say that Indiana had a superior interior passing game. And I thought that was kind of a new insight to me. I didn't think about it that in exactly those terms. But I think, Auburn's going to make that interior passing pretty difficult, I think. More difficult than Michigan did. And the guards are going to be able to pressure the ball, I think, a little bit better than Michigan did also. So we're going to have to, we can't keep up the speed of play, I don't think, that Auburn's going to want to play. We're going to have to take good care of the ball, really kind of reduce the turnovers, continue do that interior passing game, get Broom in foul trouble. He's prone to fouls just like Malik Renu is prone to foul troubles, and for us. But I think whichever of those two players, and I'm just kind of predicating one of my matchups here. I think if one of those gets in trouble and the other one doesn't, between those two players, then that could be a real advantage for the team that's not in the foul trouble. They both right now statistically are fouling about, I think they average like 3.5 fouls a game, both Malik and Johnny Broom.
Yeah, that was actually going to be one of my questions with Janai Broom, and he's really the kind of headliner for Auburn. I think he was a preseason All SEC guy. Morehead State transfer, has been a really productive player. As you think about, and this kind of happened in the Michigan game, IU switched matchups a little bit defensively in terms of trying to figure out who Khalil Ware is better to guard, who Renu is better to guard. So kind of how do you think IU approaches Broom, both from a who guards him standpoint, and also who do you think Auburn puts him on of the two guys to either keep him out of foul trouble or better utilize his strengths or things like that? Because I think that's going to be something that runs through every IU game this year, is like kind of how do you try to protect Malik from a foul standpoint, and how do other teams try to take one of the two IU big guys away?
Yeah. Well, I'll go ahead and say that that's one of the three key matchups that I see. I see Renu and Broom on each other most of the time, because I worry that, I mean, I imagine following the teams that Broom can go out fairly deep on offense, and Renu does it occasionally, but I think Broom actually goes out a little bit more than Renu does, and will take the three more than Renu will. And I think that they aren't going to want, IU's not going to want Ware going out very far away from the basket to guard Broom. So Broom would try, if they were matched up together, I think Broom would try to bring him out from the underneath the basket, and I don't think we want him to do that. Now, I may be wrong about that. I think there's going to be a lot of assisting for that, because Broom does go down interior, and that's where, then of course Ware's going to come in and try to, handle him and block his shot. But I really see, and I could be wrong, but I see Malik, Renu, and Johnny Broom, and that's really interesting. They're almost an exact physical matchup. I think they're both, I have it down here somewhere, but they're both 6'8", 6'9", 240-ish in terms of their weight. And so they play, they're both left-handed, right? They're both left-handed. Also, we saw some right-handed from Malik, which was great the other night. Yeah. But I think they are almost mirror images of one another. And they foul a lot, and their threes are not very good. They'll occasionally make one. They have great footwork underneath. That's why they get shots off that you can't imagine, that they're good rebounders. So what happens in that matchup? Who will be helping Broom on Renu will probably be, sometimes Cardwell will come in, the 6'10", 6'11" guy. But most of the time, I think it'll be Jalen Williams, who's 6'8", 6'9", and a very good, he's a fifth-year player for Auburn, and we didn't think he would even stick around. So there'll be obviously some help for Broom, but that matchup between the two of them is going to be really, really interesting.
What are the other two key matchups?
Well, I think, and I read today that it doesn't look like X is going to be back. Who knows? But if it's going to be Gabe Cupps again, I think Gabe Cupps on Holloway is as crucially important as the matchup with Doug. What was Doug's last name from Michigan?
McDaniel.
Doug McDaniel.
I mean, if it's Stephen Bardo, it's Doug E. Fresh, as he called him like 8,000 times during the game.
Yeah. He didn't run that into the ground at all during the broadcast.
Well, I usually
the appropriate
turn that
amount.
off. I synchronize Don Fisher's broadcast with the game. It's a little tricky to do, but I want to hear Fish and not listen to the other announcers. So that's what I do. But I think, given what Gabe did to do, to hold down Doug the other night, I thought that was a real key in the game. You're going to have to hold down Holloway. Now, Holloway has not been shooting the ball worth a darn. He had a game early on that was in the high 20s or something, but he's really been missing almost everything. And
he's 25.9% on twos this season.
Yeah,
holy moly,
he's not been shooting. But the kid has got unbelievable talent. I mean, if he makes a couple shots, then who knows what could happen. He just hasn't done that yet in any of the games since the very first one. But so I think Gabe, and size wise, just like Malik, Renu, and Broom are matched up physically so well. I think Holloway is barely 6 feet tall, and he weighs maybe 160 pounds. And what's Cup? 6'2", 175, something like that. So yeah. Gabe's got a little bit of size on him, just like he did on Doug. But if we can't let Holloway go off, because if that element comes into the game, which Auburn hasn't been getting 4 or 5 games, then, they've got good shooters from the outside. Donaldson, when he comes in, is a really good shooter from the outside. And so they've got 2 good point guards. And just because if we can shut down Holloway, doesn't necessarily mean we've got the backcourt figured out, because Donaldson can come in and have a really good game. I mean, he can score 20 points in a game and hit a lot of threes and drive and distribute. So, but that's really another one. You got to, if you could give Holloway another poor game, boy, that's going to improve our chances a lot.
Who do you expect to draw the matchup with Mbako? I know you said Denver Jones is the other starter, who's only 6'4". Is that?
Yeah, Jalen Williams. Jalen Williams is going to be on Mbako, okay. And I think that's going to be a very interesting matchup. And please tell me I'm wrong. I mean, I think Mbako's got a ways to go defensively and offensively. Jalen's a fifth-year senior would be going against a freshman, and Jalen's a very smart player, and it has enough size and quickness to really stay with Mbako and crowd him. And I assume they're going to be doing that and trying to, because mostly Mbako's been dangerous by shooting, although he can also drive. But I think Williams. And again, I keep thinking, well, who's going to be that second player that comes in for Williams, because it's inevitable. Auburn's got these other players that can do good jobs too. But I do think that the basic matchup is the Mbako Jalen Williams matchup. Now, I could be 0 for 3 with all three of these predictions, but that's my best analysis of what we'll end up seeing.
Makes a lot of sense.
I've got some statistics at some point if you want to hear them.
Yeah, let's get to those next. Coach, bring in this question from the chat.
Oh, yeah. Kent asked, what percentage of the crowd would you predict will be Auburn fans versus IU fans in State Farm Arena on Sunday, with Auburn being 90 minutes away from Atlanta?
Well, Auburn, it'll be a crowd with more Auburn fans. But I do believe, I've been to Indiana games in Atlanta a number of times. And Atlanta, IU fans show up a lot of places, and they really show up in Atlanta. So I would say it may be no worse than 60-40 in terms of an Auburn advantage. I'm hoping that's about what it is. I told Jared I'm taking 6, my 2 grandsons, my granddaughter, my son-in-law, and my son with me. And most of them, they grew up in Auburn and they're Auburn fans. Papa has insisted that they wear some Indiana gear. So down in section 106, rows 3 and 4, there's going to be 6 of us wearing a mixture. See, I've only got one thing on Auburn. I've got my golf clip here somewhere. If I turn my head the right way, that's all I've got on. I want to make it clear who I'm rooting for this. But I think it's a good question and it's important. But I don't think I don't think it'll be close enough in attendance, both teams, that I don't think it'll be a huge factor in terms of the crowd noise.
The numbers. What were the numbers that you think?
Yeah, well, I wanted to say, just some numbers that show that there are 10 players that are averaging 15 minutes a game. Now, is that pretty comparable to what IU would have, or would IU be a little bit less time?
I use a little less. I'm looking at Auburn. They don't have any individual player playing more than 59% of the minutes. Yeah. And Indiana does, like Trey Galloway's playing like 80-some% of minutes. Right.
Some of the primary team statistics, I've got individual stuff here too, but points per game. Everything. If you look at the stats, and I should have done what Andy usually so wisely does, and that's share his screen and show the numbers so you don't have to remember them all. But points per game, Auburn is 78.6 and Indiana is 74.1. That's kind of a wash, it seems to me. Rebounds, Auburn's 41.3 a game and Indiana's 33.8. That may be a function of just how many shots are going up in Auburn games. Compared to
and Auburn's top 20 in the country in offensive rebounding rate.
There you go.
So that's a big part of it, and that's Indiana's going to have to clean that up from where it was.
Hopefully, Ware is such a remarkable. I think Coach said this the other day. He is such a remarkably skilled rebounder, and hopefully that's going to take away the Auburn potential advantage underneath. Assists. Auburn is 18.4, IU is 14.4. Steals, it's almost the same, 6.3, 6.5. Blocks, 5.7 for Auburn, 4.8 for Indiana. I think not that Weir has all of our blocks, but I think there may be more threats for blocking shots from the Auburn front court than the Indiana front court. Turnovers are about the same, 11.9 for Auburn, 12.6 for Indiana. Field goal percentage is a little difference here, 44.4 for Auburn and 50.4 for Indiana. I'm using
which reflects the different shot diets of the two teams, because Auburn's chucking up so many threes. And Indiana
wait till you. This is where we're going. The free throw is exactly the same. They're both 69.3. So let's hope ours gets a lot tighter with the free throws. 3 points made. The percentage isn't that different. 29.6 for Auburn and 25.8 for Indiana. But
both teams are less than 30%.
yeah, Auburn's made 48 and Indiana's made 25. Auburn has shot 162 and Indiana's shot 97. So
and there's an important lesson there, because Auburn is 33rd in the country in offensive efficiency, even shooting that poor of a percentage, but the volume has helped to pick up, some of the difference there.
One of the reasons that I had a little category of here of what, in case I got asked what happened at Appalachian State this past weekend. And there's a few things to say, but I think you can almost reduce it to this. Auburn shot 3 for 27 from the 3 and 9 for 19 from the charity line. And for the first time in the Coach Bruce Pearl era, that meant that AU was less than 50% from the foul line and less than 25% from the 3. So we can hope that that's going to repeat itself on Saturday.
Do it
again. but I wouldn't bet on it. I wouldn't bet on it. And of course, another thing about that game, I'm not sure you guys watched any of it, but Bruce took them into Boone, North Carolina, because he wanted to have an atmosphere that was like an away SEC game. Well, he got that in spades, because that crowd was rabid and the lights out. Anytime Auburn, there was only one time Auburn had a chance down the stretch. They went to a zone. It's kind of like Indiana did in their one game. They went and they got 4 straight stops, but they couldn't make any shots. So it really didn't help them a whole lot. It was kind of an anomaly game, I think, but road games can be that. That happens. And I think I was hoping that Auburn would win, not only because I'd usually root for Auburn, but I didn't want them to be so focused and agitated for our game. I wanted them to sort of be a little relaxed team. They're not going to be that. They're going to come out that game with their hair on fire. And Indiana is going to have to be able to match that intensity, but hopefully not. I said Auburn was controlled chaos. Indiana used to be controlled and aggressive, not chaotic. They're going to need to not let Auburn get off into any quick runs, not be turning the ball over, making good passes, no silly fouls. Because if you let them get ahead quick, then the crowd, if it's 60-40, is going to get more and more into the game. So that the start, as always, is really important. And Auburn starts can be really fast starts.
Yeah, just a couple quick numbers that really speak to some of the other things you said. If you look at the possession length on offense, Auburn is 33rd, so it's only 15 and a half seconds. So it speaks to the wanting to get up shots quickly. But defensively, they're one of the longest, where their pressure kind of makes teams take a little bit extra time, whether that's just getting the ball off the court and things like that. But one of the questions I was going to ask you was, at this point they've lost twice. The opener to Baylor, which I watched some of. They won.
They were ahead for 36 of those 40 minutes. As Andy. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they win 5 straight, and they dropped that game at App State, which is exhibit 906 of why teams do not want to go play road games against lower conference teams than non-conference. But were there any common threads between those games that were maybe are indicators that we can look for to say, hey, this is, if you look at these couple numbers or these couple players or whatever the case may be, like what were maybe some common threads between the games that they didn't end up coming out on top?
We've been having some issues with Jim's connection.
Well, I just thought it was such a good question that it just took time to.
Okay, I think his connection is refreshing. It was a great question, Andy. So hopefully we can get him back here, but we'll see. If not, we'll pop to Mailbag and then we'll hit those questions on the other side. So we'll see.
It was funny though. I did see that they were playing at App State, just as I was, some of the stuff I track for bracketology, and I was like, that'll be an interesting game because App State's pretty good, one of the better teams in the Sun Belt, where James Madison is, with that Michigan State knows all too well at this point. And I was like, yeah, you never know. Like, that'll be a tougher game than people think. And I was like, yeah, this is why when you talk to coaches about, oh, do you want to, why don't you schedule these games? It's like, oh, somebody can just point right back to that one and be like, that right there is why you don't schedule it.
Well, it may pay off. Who knows? Maybe having that experience and that bad game that they lost. Maybe when they go to South Carolina or Florida or something, maybe it'll help them. In terms of a common denominator, that's a really good question, and it's made while I was blinked off the internet here, I tried to think about it a little bit more. I'm not sure that there's anything common in terms of Auburn's performance. What really made the day was the performance of the other team. I mean, they played beautifully down the stretch. Auburn did have a lot of fouls, and Baylor didn't miss a single free throw coming through the end. I mean, it looked like with a minute left, it looked like Auburn was still going to win the game or could. But the last 4 minutes, it was just foul shot after foul shot. And with App State, they just never. I mean, when Auburn put the zone in and got those 4 stops, they just didn't make shots. And so I think it's a combination of different things. I think each game, unfortunately, if you knew that one thing that you needed to do well to win, you'd try to work that out before the game. But I think there's too much variety. I don't see a whole lot of commonality in why they lost. I mean, I do think for us, I don't make predictions. I don't make bets. But I do think if Indiana keeps Auburn to less than 70 points, then there's going to be a good chance that IU will win. If they get more than 70 points, the chances will go down. I know that some of the websites I saw had Auburn favored by 7, I think.
Yeah.
But it's a game that Indiana can win, and it'll be a really good win. I think Indiana fans that don't know Auburn, and I think it's more and more fans do know Auburn now than they knew them in the past. They know Bruce Pearl, and they know the Final Four team that should have beaten Virginia and just played so well. Has won the SEC a couple of times. It's a big win. If you can beat Auburn this year, it may not have the brand name of Duke or Kansas, or Michigan for that matter. But if you beat Auburn this year, you beat a really good team. They're going to be a hard team to beat, but Indiana's going to be a hard team to beat if they keep playing the way they've been playing. So it is a fascinating matchup, and it'll be real interesting. Hopefully some of the matchups that I've described are really going to pan out and in our favor. It's going to be I've been to, like I said before, I've been to a number of games for IU. I was at the 84 game when we beat North Carolina.
Wow. And
that was the most remarkable game. I mean, it was such a shocker. And when you look back on it, I watched that tape 10 times. And it's like, how did that team beat Michael Jordan and Sam Perkins? I mean, it just
pretty good coach.
Yeah.
Coach.
Dean Smith should have done a few things differently, but it could be. I think it'll be a great game, and let's hope we don't lay an egg. I don't think we're gonna do that. I think we're playing them tough. We just can't let them get too crazy with their shooting.
Jim, I got to ask you this question as a football fan, a guy who likes to tailgate, and you're down there at Auburn.
You need to come down and watch a game.
Toomer's Corner. It's one of my bucket lists to be able to go, and I know, unfortunately, there was an issue a few years back, but that tradition, what's it like being down there in SEC football country? We have 26,000 people in our stadium sometimes.
Yeah.
The SEC is different. Toomer's Corner, what's it like?
Well, it's just a massive crowd in one small town square with the oak trees that get toilet papered, with everybody. Just they always talk about the family, and I think that can be overdone a little bit. But it is an incredible atmosphere. Having grown up in Indiana, grown up in Fort Wayne, I went to Ohio State for graduate school, so I was pretty familiar with football tradition. But I don't know if there's a better home environment because of the small town, because of the kind of weather you sometimes get in Auburn in the fall. You guys need to all come down. I'll get us tickets. It's a wonderful
awesome.
place.
I'm going to take you up on that.
Yeah, please do. And so we should have beaten Bama. How that Hail Mary worked out. We only rushed 2 guys at the quarterback. That was really silly. We should have gotten them this year. But even with football, if Indiana and Auburn play, and I had another little line of arguments and things to share. I won't do it, but 1990 Peach Bowl.
I was gonna say it was a
Remember
bowl. It was a bowl
That's
game.
right.
I couldn't remember
Yeah,
which
I was
one,
there.
but I knew it was a bowl game.
Yeah, and Indy
Yeah.
and Fulton County Stadium was where the game was played, and we were up. I say we, Indiana. Trent Green was the quarterback, and we were up with 47 seconds to go until they ran one in on us. And
I hope my dad's not listening to this episode.
And that was a Bill Mallory coach team.
It's a sore spot.
Pat Dye and Bill Mallory. And it was a late afternoon, nice southern temperature.
It was
game.
great.
Yeah.
That's three of us that were there, right? Then, because I was there.
Yeah.
That's good. Jim, thank you for answering that question. I know
My pleasure.
this is a basketball show, but I appreciate that and appreciate you being on.
Yeah,
I
Coach,
want to also mention
Coach
Marco
just pick me up
Killingsworth.
on your way down for that game too.
Yes,
Okay.
Marco
Oh, yeah.
I will.
Yeah, all right.
I'll drive. I'll pick everyone up.
Yeah, well, I can even go up. I know Cincinnati well, but I also want to mention the name Marco Killingsworth. You guys remember
yes.
him?
Yep.
You know, he played at Auburn for 3 years.
Oh,
and
if
then
only
came-
If only Ryan was here to
Ryan's
regale
favorite
us.
moment as an
To
IU
regale
fan.
us once
Well,
again with
you
the
know,
story.
I
of
had
the
remembered
Killingsworth
him
game.
having this great game against Duke, and it turned out he scored 31 points. But in my mind, I thought we had won that game. But we didn't win that game. But
The game ended with the dunk. I don't think
Yeah,
anybody
okay.
remembers anything after that moment.
Yeah. But didn't you guys remember? I mean, maybe the two younger ones don't. And that, no offense, Coach. I'm a lot older than you are, so
That's
don't worry
all right.
about it. But
I'm so excited someone called me young. I just,
yeah, well,
I had a moment at work today. Somebody was talking about something. I had no idea what it was. I was like, man, this is rough.
Yeah.
This is what it's like. So thanks, Jim. I appreciate it.
You
No
bet.
matter what you say after this, I
you don't
appreciate
remember
whatever it
any
is.
of the 6 or 7 games that Indiana played against Notre Dame in the Fort Wayne Coliseum, though, right? I mean,
I do not remember those. I do not remember
or that
those.
the Fort Wayne were the Fort Wayne Pistons for a long time. That's
I did know that from having lived there. I did know
okay.
that.
Okay. Well, and then there was another one I wanted to mention, that John Memgelt, who is a legend in Auburn basketball. Where did he play high school? Elwood, Indiana.
Really?
Why? I think he's still living. If I ever have a chance to meet him, I'm going to say, how in the heck did you get down to Auburn in '67? Why didn't you stay at IU or go to Purdue at least?
Played for the Bulls.
He played for the Bulls, and he played for the Cincinnati Royals. That's why I was
Yeah.
thinking about Andy.
Wow.
He played for the Cincinnati Royals.
All right. Well, Jim, just so you know, I'm getting text. This is from Patrick, who goes by Elbows in the chat. He says Jim is awesome. So we don't usually get texts during the show, but we're getting live texts on this. Perhaps the greatest pregame breakdown that I think we've ever had. on
Well,
the show.
Absolutely.
That was
Well,
incredibly detailed and thorough. and
If
we
you look at
appreciate
any of my 14 books, one of the main criticisms of my books that they're way too detailed. We didn't really need to know that, did we? But that's who I am.
No, that was great. Well, it's especially useful because we're not, like you said, we're not that familiar with Auburn as Indiana fans. Our paths haven't crossed that much. And so just getting to learn about the style and the personnel, I think will help everybody watch the game and kind of put what they're seeing in the proper context, which is exactly what we wanted to do. And you did a wonderful job. So we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Anytime.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah,
You
no,
bet.
that was fantastic. We're gonna do mailbag next. Do you want to hang around for the mailbag?
Happy to stay. Yeah.
Let's do it. That'd be awesome. Okay, coming up here on Assembly Call Radio, it is mailbag time. We got a bunch of good questions, mostly basketball, but even a football question or two from our Substack subscribers, and so we will answer those next here on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. All righty. Jim, that was great.
Well,
Thank you.
When you said you're getting texts, I was worried that it was your dad saying, "Okay, get this guy off of here." After he brought that back in.
Yeah, why
I did
was he
too.
talking about that? No.
Well, I mean, that was a pretty good performance for Indiana's football team.
Yeah, it was a good game.
Yeah.
It was. It was.
I think
Yeah, we always
Stan
came up short against the SEC teams in the bowl games. Lost to Tennessee twice, I think, and then Auburn.
Well, it's going to be an interesting future in Indiana football, I think, with this coach. I mean, what a character he is.
I know. It will be interesting. Seems like he's got a plan, the kind of plan that Indiana needs, but we will see.
Well, did you see this? All the quarterbacks that are coming out in the portal, and I forget which coach it was, but apparently they're saying that to get one of the portal quarterbacks, you're going to have $1.9 to $2 million for NIL for the player.
Imagine we'll be shopping in a different aisle for our quarterback, I would think. We'll see. I wonder if he's going to bring the guy
we'll
from JMU.
We'll be at the TJ Maxx version of whatever the portal is.
Yes. We will. Okay, let's hop into the mailbag. Here we go.
This is Anthony Leo. What's the only thing better than being a hometown Hoosier? Having a friendly place to hang out online after IU games, no matter where in the world you may be. So join Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach right here after every IU basketball game.
Thank you, Anthony. You are listening to the Assembly Call. I am Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms, the coach Brian Tonsoni, and our special guest, Jim Hansen, who just provided an excellent analysis of Indiana's opponent for Saturday. Is going to stick around and help us answer these questions. So we got a lot of good mailbag questions this week. All of these submitted in our private discussion community on Substack. You can learn more about that and join at assemblycall.com. We just basically turned it into our entire website. So all the information about how to subscribe and everything is there too, along with all of our content, free and premium. We'd love to have you join. It's free to join, and then you can try everything out and decide if you want to become a paid member. But one of the perks is our paid members get the opportunity to ask us the questions that we answer here in the mailbag. So let's hit these questions. Coach, I'll send this first one to you since I talked a little bit about this in the banner moment. From Philip, what do you think is a component of Mackenzie Mbako's game that we have not seen yet, but that we will see and will help take him and the team to the next level?
Well, I think he's a really good shooter, and he hasn't hit consistently yet. So his outside shooting is something that I think will be there sooner than later. I loved his shot he hit at Michigan because it was somewhat contested, or at least someone was close to him. It wasn't just a wide open catch and shoot. And you've already shown that they're getting some staggered doubles and they're running some curls for him to get him going. So I think that aspect. But the other aspect that I think would be nice, and I know he could do it if he was playing more a traditional 4 than a 3. Can he get to the rim and get fouled because of his great foul shooting? Can he put the ball on the deck? Can they utilize him in some screen and roll ball screen actions to get fouls? You saw what you said about putting him in late, trusting him. He hasn't missed one all year. To get north-south, does he have a north-south game component? As right now it's, catch and shoot or curl in the lane, but can he just take someone off the dribble? I'm not sure he has that, but that would be something I would think we need to. And there's so much in every player that needs to be developed. You obviously want to see him not be able to being subbed out for offense, defense late. But that's obvious. But I think the north-south game is the one that I'm going to watch. Can he deck it, and can he get to the rack and get fouled or scored in crunch time situations? And will he be our go-to guy? If that develops, we're really going to be fine.
Yeah, I think he's shown that a little bit at times. You'd like to see it more, but I think, during that run that IU had against Michigan, and Michigan comes down and hits a 3, he basically took it on the left wing and just drove right to the hoop. So I think he has that. I think it's, a matchup thing with him. And one of the things I would say, I think the shooting one is the obvious one where you feel like that's bound to come around. It just seems like he's too good of a shooter for it not to. But the other thing, they've tried a little bit, and he just hasn't gotten good enough positioning. But like if he's going to play the 3, try to post him up a little bit. And he showed some of those skills as you watch some of the highlights and the high school stuff with him. But I think what he's allowed himself to do too often when they've tried him to do that before is, 1, he's not getting positioned deep enough in the post, and 2, he kind of makes his mind up that he's going to shoot. And he's taking these really, really tough turnaround, fadeaway type shots. But I think if they could get some action together to actually get him, some of those rubs they do along the baseline or something where you could like get him the ball there. Now, the problem is if he's playing the 3 and you do that, where in the world are you putting Ware and Renu so you haven't clogged up the entire lane? But I do think he's got some ability there. And if you're going to play him at the 3 and give up some things defensively, which you are, you've got to find ways to take advantage of some of those kinds of matchups with him. And maybe that's a case where you don't see that until he's playing a little bit more of the 4. But I'd like to see a little bit more of that. I thought he had a really nice cut for a basket early in the Michigan game where Cups found him and a little bit less stationary. But you saw him in the Maryland game hit that corner 3 where it's like, man, right where the M for or what Miller Kopp say that the M was supposed to be there, or did he want a K there? Maybe if you put an M there, maybe that can be where Ibaka stands. But but those are shots he's going to be able to get. And so outside of the shooting, to me, I think it's just finding, ultimately the common thread here is this guy's a scorer that they need. They got to find other ways that he can score, whether that's going to the basket, posting up, whatever the case may be. Like, I think being able to score in a wider variety of ways, I guess, is maybe the way to sum up what both Coach and I said.
Get him shots. Jim, I'm curious what your initial impressions are of McKenzie.
Well, he's a mystery in a lot of ways. I was sitting here thinking while Andy and Coach were talking, if he reaches his potential this year, and he's got a big potential to reach, who would he remind us of in IU basketball history? I'm kind of at a loss. I mean, the
probably
person
Christian Watford, I guess, would be
that guy came to my mind. But I'm being older than you. I think what I would do if I was Woodson is I'd pop in a lot of George McGinnis tapes and watch McGinnis go to work. Now, I don't think there's some differences. McGinnis had some more size than he did, but McGinnis had an outside shot and he could certainly drive. And I think that to me would be great if he could reach and start to play and have the impact. I mean, McGinnis, of course, had a 30-point average when he was at IU, and Mbako's not going to do that. But can you guys? I mean, do you have a comp? Someone would remind you of a improved Mbako player that's been either for Indiana or for another Big Ten team? He seems like he's quite an original.
Yeah, I mean, the outside shooting and the rebounding are what remind me of Watford. And he's got a long way to go to be the defender Watford was later in his career because he really improved as a defender. I don't know. I mean, there are probably other guys. Coach, Andy, do you guys have any other comments?
I would say Watford, and that's been, from the recruiting analysts saying he was more of a 4 to the national guys saying more of a 4. Watford played to 4. And I think that's a perfect comp. But we got to have him out there, in that traditional 3. I just think that's a good IU comp.
And by the way, Jim, you mentioned George McGinnis. I know he's been dealing with some health issues, so we're keeping him. Yeah, so keep him in your thoughts. Keep Big George in your thoughts.
I mentioned to you, Jared, my email that I was at the 1970 Final Four Indiana high school tournament that when Downing and McGinnis played and won the championship. But boy, did they have a struggle to do it against Marion and Gary Roosevelt. That in my mind, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of that a couple of years ago. That to me was the greatest Final Four Saturday in Indiana high school basketball history. I mean, we had some great ones, but that was really remarkable.
Such a rich history with Indiana's tournament, man. Yeah. Incredible. All right, let's see. This question is from Bob Thompson. Send it to you first, Andy. How do you think Oregon fans are feeling when they see highlights of Ware this season? How do you think Dana Altman is feeling? He says, as a Hoosier fan, I'm feeling fantastic.
I mean, I think that's always I know it's a somewhat tongue-in-cheek question. I think it's you'd like to think it's the same approach that I think we often try to take with IU guys who go other places, that maybe they just need to change the scenery and it wasn't the right fit, wasn't the right timing or whatever. The flip side of that is, I think as a coach, you're probably asking yourself, how in the world was I not able to get some portion of this out of this guy? And I think if you're in that situation, I'm probably giving too serious an answer to this question, quite honestly, in the spirit that Bob intended it. But, you're probably.
I think he just wanted you to laugh and point, Andy.
Yeah. I think that's. I mean, I would love to. But you're probably thinking about, what did I not do to be able to, I think the talent was undeniable when he was there, right? So, how was I not able to reach him? How did I handle him that I could have been differently? And I think that goes back to a little bit what I said in the opening of, Woodson really seems to have developed a pretty good relationship with him, and one where he can coach him hard, but clearly, trust him and has really built him up in a way that has answered so many of those questions that were there before the season. And I think if you're Altman, you're probably trying to figure out how was I not able to do some of that. And I'm sure people can go back to different things from Altman's past and probably make judgments on, what his character, things like that, if they want to. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly hard not to lament letting a guy like that get away and then watching him really flourish in a different system with a different, kind of coaching, teaching relationship that's there.
Yeah, and the reality, Coach, is it's possible there's nothing Oregon could have done. Khalil was far away from home. The assistant who recruited him left. we had many conversations about this when he committed. He, kind of felt like he was out of place and didn't connect with the head coach. Like, who knows? He probably just needed a change of scenery and something closer to home and a different coach that was. So, I mean, it's funny to to say that, but without knowing all the inner workings in there, maybe Dana Altman messed it up and maybe it was just something that the fit was bad. We have no idea. So I'm sure he's looking at it with regret in some form or fashion, but we don't know enough of what went on behind the scenes to be able to say, one way or the other. Coach, you're shaking your head.
Yeah. Dana Altman don't give a crap. I mean, I think he's pretty happy. He'd be happy anytime you have a kid in your program, they move on to do something well. You're probably happy for him. But Dana's worried about Oregon. He's not watching Indiana basketball. He may be hearing the kids doing a good job, and then he's probably, if we coaches are stubborn and cocky, he's probably like, yeah, he's had 7 games. We had him for a full year. I'll come back and revisit it, and I'll really think, ask that question of what I didn't do for him if he does that for a whole entire year, because he started out with Oregon, and then in the middle of the year it didn't. I think Ware's fine. I'm not being critical of Ware. I'm just telling you how college coaches are. They're worried about Oregon. They're not spending hardly any time wondering, why didn't I do that, right? It might be in the back of their head at some point. At some point it might hit him, but I think he's more worried, and he's rightfully worried to get that Oregon group going because they're not necessarily playing well.
Jim?
Yeah, in keeping with the theme with this issue and the theme of stubborn coaches and coaches interested in their agenda and the Auburn-Indiana connection, I flash back to Bobby Knight not putting Charles Barkley on the '84 Olympics team and putting Steve Alford as a freshman on the team. With Barkley to this day, I've talked to Chuck a few times, and he's still bitter about. He thinks there was a real personal grudge against him that the coach had, because he had a really good Olympic trial. Of course, Knight didn't pick John Stockton or Karl Malone for the team either. So, Barkley, that's what I said to Charles, and he still thinks it was personal.
Jim has now surpassed Ryan for the best casual name drop on the assembly call.
Yeah, I'm good at that. I haven't mentioned Neil Armstrong.
I talked to
Chuck. Yeah.
All right, Coach, let me send this one to you from Michael. He says, while Michigan while Michigan still put up 17 three-point attempts, if memory serves, it looked like the strategy was to play the perimeter tight on defense with less concern for getting blown by, knowing there would be help closer to the bucket. Is that how they were playing defense against Michigan? If so, it seems like a good strategy moving forward, given what has happened with opponents' success from 3 for years now. What is the opponent's counter to that defensive strategy?
Yeah, so I think Indiana's doing a multiple different types of defenses on the whole. Sometimes they're strong on the nail. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're switching. Sometimes they're not. They're not switching on the 1 through 4 as much and putting Renu out there on the perimeter. So I think that's been a decision that has been made for that. And that's where a lot of college basketball is going to now. It's guard the 3, try to guard your yard, and if you get blown by, you have rim protection there, or you just try to have contested 2s. I know Illinois does that. I know Michigan State does that. They will change up per scouting report on that somewhat, but that's why TJD went off against Illinois last year, because they said, we want TJD to score. We just don't want everyone else to. And Underwood was really mad about Geronimo getting 10 or 12 points in that game and thought that was a difference in the game. So a lot of coaches are doing that, whether that's right or wrong, and that's where it looks bad when Cups is getting driven and some of those people, Galloway's getting driven, and they're getting hung up in that high ball screen when they chase over the top and then the guy goes to the lane. But when you have not only Ware shot blocking, but Renu can do that, be quick off his feet too. I like that strategy. You're seeing that a little bit more. Sometimes they're adjusting to the elbow. The strategy is, if you have a guy like Jalen Hood-Schifino or a really good pull-up guard that has a hot game, that's going to be dangerous, right? That's how you beat that, is you don't get to the rim protection, you pull up and shoot. That would be the adjustment. But a lot of offenses are now 3 and rim, right? 3 and rim. It's a dunk or it's a 3-point shot. So again, I think our defense has evolved in the 8 games, in my opinion. And sometimes it's even hard for me without going back and watching film over and over again and not being in the room to know exactly what they're doing. But it sure looks different than those first 3 games when they were just 1 through 4 switching and a heavy nail. There's been adjustments within that per team that Indiana's playing.
Yeah, because you really can't. To me, it hasn't been enough games that. I mean, maybe this is underselling what they're kind of how they're coaching, but you couldn't possibly have improved this much by playing the same scheme over the short period of time that it is. So to me, and I'm a little bit like you, where I haven't gone back and watched some of them, but like there has to be some different things schematically, and you look at teams. And Coach, you mentioned one of them was Illinois. I was kind of just looking on Ken Palmet, who year over year does a good job of having low opponent 3-point rates. Illinois was one, St. Mary's was another, and St. Mary's was very much, IU saw some of this, when they played them in the tournament a couple years ago, but they've for years been up there, and Creighton in the last few years has gotten a lot better at it as they've done it, and they've never really been one who's been renowned for defense, but in a world where a lot of teams are doing rim and 3, like you're talking about, Coach, defensively, you're trying to figure out how you can make people move away from that. So your best bet, if you want to try to counteract that, is run them off the 3-point line, force them to drive you, hope that they pull up, as you said, or have somebody who can take away the shots at the rim and do it that way. So, it's just kind of, you look at the trend and try to figure out how to get people off of that trend. It is a way that it can make it work. And I think you see, and you've seen some of this, CJ Gunn's the best example in that game, but like IU does have the length to be able to get out, challenge guys, and not give the wide open looks that they have and be disruptive defensively. There's tons of guys who fall into that category, whether it's Gunn, presumably when he's back. I think Anthony Walker's been able to do a little bit of that. Caleb Banks, there's a lot of guys who can be disruptive in that way and be able to close out if they, run whatever scheme they're trying to do correctly. And so, for a handful of games, they've done a better job at that. Auburn is one, to me, based on not watching them as much this year, but in general, is they don't really care if you're trying to take that away. They're going to take some of those shots anyway. And so maybe that's a good thing for IU. Maybe it's not. But they have done a much better job, and it's a small sample size inside of a small sample size. So whether that's sustainable for them remains to be seen. But I do think they've got the personnel to be able to pull off something like that.
All right. We can rapid fire a few more of those. Let's see. Is Jim back? He's having some connection issues. Let's see. Try one more time here. Oh, we'll see if we can get him back here in just a second. Okay, so this question from Mike. He says, what was Gabe Cup's free throw percentage as a high school player, and do you think he should try getting to the free throw line or, driving to get fouled more? So Gabe last season at Centerville High School shot 92% from the free throw line, 87 of 95, and actually shot 39.5% from three-point range. So, Coach, Gabe can make those shots. I think the question is, in college at his size here in his first go-around, how likely is it when he drives in that he is going to get fouled, or his shots just going to get rejected? I'm just not yes, it would be great to get Gabe Cupps to the free throw line. I'm just not sure what the path to him actually doing that is right now, because he's not enough of a scoring threat for teams to foul him.
Yeah, totally agree that the driving game and at the rim game where you're going to get fouled is probably not where he's the best. It looks like he really likes that pull up at the elbow. There's a few times when he's gotten a pass up top or a kick out and he's shot faked and he's tried to get the elbow and he's just missed those a couple times. I think that's where he's going to get his points right now. We'll have to see what his development is over the years, if he can get in there and take a hit at this level. I don't doubt that he will get there. I don't know that he's there at this moment. What he does really well is get the ball to the right spots. And his production might not be even assists. It might be hockey assists. That's something maybe we need to track the next game. Does he make a pass and then the pass goes into the post? I think the other thing that's happening, I know there's a pretty heated discussion in the chat, and every side of that discussion is somewhat correct, that I think the coaching staff is calling more stuff. I don't know. I'm not there. I'm not behind the bench listening to it. But they are running more stuff than just straight line drive and middle ball screen, because that's not Gabe's job right now. They run a little bit of it, but Gabe's job is to move the basketball and then eventually hit some shots. That's where his points are going to get, and in late game situation maybe get fouled. But I don't think he is going to be a guy we really want attacking really hard. He's attacking to draw defense, to kick if he is attacking, and that's probably not going to put him in a foul situation. I think he's done a wonderful job. I know there's a huge discussion. I think if X comes back and plays like that, obviously we need X, in my opinion. So, but X needs to play as a facilitator and a scorer, not just a scorer. And I think the coaching staff needs to take something off X's plate. If they are trusting him to call the offense, that makes him slow down and think, and then the offense – and that's where you see the pounding of the basketball a little bit more. And the offense has not run as smooth with him as it has with Gabe Cupps. That is true. But I don't believe that means that we're better without X. I think we're better with X because of all the stuff he can do. But he needs to play like he did in that Big Ten tournament where he's getting 7, 8, 9 assists along with scoring. And he has not done that yet. And so to compensate in the loss – you had to bring Gabe in. You had to run some sets. You're throwing the ball to the high post. You're running floppy action. You're running the staggered doubles, all the stuff that Ryan and I have been clamoring for, because that's what Gabe Cupps does best. He's not X. And there's some good portions of that, and there's some portions where we need X. So we need a combination of all that when they come back. And they need to play those two together and put X off the ball in a scoring position and let Gabe's initiate the offense. I want to see that, not just backing him up.
All right, Jim, do we have you?
Well, while I'm back, we have some weather coming through, I think, interrupting my Wi-Fi service. But just I should, if next time I'm off, I'll stay off. I just want to thank you guys for the great hospitality. And I look forward to getting to know you. Hopefully I can come to Bloomington during the one time when you guys have the games. All the people come together. I'd love to come and see you. So
that would be great. Thanks, I have a feeling people are going to be asking for a return appearance. So don't when I send that email.
You know how to reach me. Yeah, absolutely.
By the way, while you're here, we got a great comment from Libby Torfey, one of our longtime listeners, who actually spent a lot of time with the 1984 team when they were in Bloomington.
Oh, cool.
And as she said, Bob Knight picked Alford for that team, so he had someone he could use as a target to yell at, who understood how he did things. And he told Barkley he needed to shed some pounds, and Barkley refused.
Well, Sonny Smith had already told him to lose some pounds too, but it didn't work. But that's a very interesting story that that Barkley didn't get put on that team. But it helped us for Steve's future to play in the Olympic team.
Yeah. Okay, from Mark. He says, does IU need to bring in some refs to their practices? Many fouls seem to be avoidable without taking away their intensity. Correct me if I'm wrong, Coach. I think refs are at most practices, especially when they scrimmage. They have refs there at least sometimes to be able to call and get used to that.
Yeah, especially in the preseason more. I don't know how much in season they do because of time limitations and travel, but they definitely do that, especially with any rule changes and emphasis that the officials are told. So they do that, and it helps. But I don't know that they have them in all the time throughout the season.
All right, from Andy, did you want to say something?
No, it was going to be mean about the officials, so I don't bother. I was just rifling through lots of snide comments, and none of them probably needed to be made, so you're good to go on.
All right, we got a few more. We'll hit these kind of rapid fire here from George. He says, 8 games in, how would you disperse minutes for the next 5 games, assuming X is out until the new year? And we don't know that. I do think it is within the realm of possibility that X could be out until the new year while they just let his foot heal. I could also see them trying to get him back for Kansas. I don't think he's going to play Saturday. I mean, we'll see. No one thought he was going to play in the Empire Classic either, and he did. So we'll just have to wait and see. But let's just take George's premise that X is out until the new year. How would you disperse the minutes for the next 5 games? Jim, why don't you go first, and then Andy, you go next.
Well, I think what he's been doing it pretty well the last few games, and I think Gunn is gonna play maybe as many minutes as he played the other night. I think he could really elevate the team performance. I think with his shooting and his length, and plays good defense for the most part. So I think he may continue to build his minutes. And Bates, I think, he's probably – and Walker. I mean, I really like the way they come in and just sort of don't back down. I mean, they Auburn's got a lot of players like that too, so we need to have them for Saturday and beyond. So I would think that that our substitution pattern may get closer and closer to the kind of multiverse thing that I was describing for Auburn, that you're going to see such a blending that it's not going to be a team kind of thing as much as it was earlier in the year.
Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of using the Michigan box score as a proxy just because it may help me, get that. So you had your top guys in terms of minutes played against Michigan were Renu at 33, Cups at 32, Galloway at 31. I think that's probably a more reasonable number for Galloway, given some of the struggles he's had. I think you said earlier he's playing 82% of minutes. Like, that just seems like a lot, especially with all that's on his plate. Now, some of that's dependent upon how Cups is playing and how Gunn's coming along. So, I think those guys probably have to play fairly close. Him and Cups have to play close to 30 minutes. I think the one that you look at that game that needed to play more is Khalil Ware. Foul trouble played a factor there. He only played 25 minutes. But Gunn got 20 minutes. I think that's reasonable as you go forward. And I think if you take Ware up, maybe that cuts into a little bit of what you get out of a Peyton Sparks, who played 9 minutes in that game. And Mbako played 23. I think ultimately you'd like to play him just a touch more, maybe a couple more minutes, just because you need a scorer. So, to me, as you look at how the minutes were distributed in that game, maybe you don't need to play. You take a minute from Malik, you take a couple minutes from Sparks, give those to Ware and Mbako, and maybe Gunn gets a couple extra minutes here and there. But I think looking at Walker and Banks getting 13, 14. Banks. Like maybe 15 minutes a game, I think is a good number for those guys as energy guys. So I think that game actually was short of Ware, which was really a function of the foul trouble, and would have been interesting to see how that, that game played out. I don't think it was a terrible mix. You didn't really run anybody into the ground in terms of having somebody play 38 minutes and things like that. And I think you were able to let Gunn get into a rhythm and stay in a rhythm and play a little bit more. So that game is probably not a terrible way to break it down with maybe a couple tweaks.
Yeah, I tell you, my one thing real quick, I really like what Peyton Sparks brings, but I think there's some lineups without Peyton that might make Indiana better. One is Walker at the 4 with Renu at the 5 when Ware has to go out. Instead of every time Ware has to go out, you put Sparks in. Because sometimes if you have Sparks and Renu, man, that's really low post. Like, Ware can at least step out and stretch the floor when he's playing with Renu. So if what Woodson is doing right now is there is a designated sub for each player, especially when X gets back. And when that player needs to come out or get in foul trouble, that specific backup goes in. I really think there's some better combinations. And then the minutes, like, I like an 8 or 9 man rotation. I just do. I think it's very difficult to play 10. You can try to play 10, but it disrupts a lot of stuff. I thought Anthony Walker's play in the last 2 Big Ten games was pivotal because of his athleticism. And I appreciate Peyton Sparks 1,000%, and we're going to need him to beat the crap out of Edey. And I would start him and then just get 3 fouls right away and really tick off their crowd and do all that kind of stuff. We're going to need him, and he's going to win some games for us. And he hasn't played horribly. But I think when you try to force minutes, it could hurt down the stretch in games like this against athletes like Auburn has. Maybe we do need him against Dickinson a little bit, but there are matchups where he's going to play those 9 to 12, and then there's others where he's only got to play a little bit if we're going to maximize the athleticism on our roster. So that's how I would go about that.
From James, he says, on a positive note, how about looking at the improvements in the other guards since X went down? Well, it's not great that X is hurt. It certainly seems the younger players are stepping up. Playing against real Big Ten competition is possibly the best thing for them. They don't have X to lean on. He goes on to say, look at CJ as an example. He's starting to show some real possibilities. I think this is an interesting point, Andy, which is, Indiana is not better without Xavier Johnson. I can't believe for the second straight season we're having this discussion. We had it last year. It was wrong. We're having it this year, and it's wrong. People have short memories. His first season in December, he was struggling a little bit with his role. He got booed at Notre Dame. And then by the end of the year, he was locked in. Everything was going well. And people were like, man, I can't believe we booed him. Well, let's learn from history, folks. Like, have a little bit of patience. But I will say, and Coach has outlined, like, some of the struggles that Indiana was having, things are flowing a little bit better in certain senses. So there is a chance for this to be a real learning opportunity for Indiana. And I think Jim, brings up some of the other points, Andy, which is it's forcing guys like Cupps to get more minutes than they would. CJ Gunn is getting more opportunities. And those guys are having positive experiences that are developing their skills and building confidence that, you would never say, hey, let's not play X for 6 games in the non-conference, including, our most pivotal non-conference games. But if you're going to have that happen, you want to try and get something out of it. And I think the evidence suggests that Indiana is getting as much out of this time with X as they can, which does not reflect poorly on him or shouldn't reflect poorly on him, but is, I think, something to commend those players and the coaching staff for.
I think there's two ways I would look at it. One is it's allowed some of the guys like a Cupps. It's basically taken away the ability for Woodson to do the first unit, second unit thing because you only got 9 now, right? And so what you've seen is, what does CJ Gunn look like playing with some of the other starters? What does Gabe Cupps look like playing with some of the other starters where they can take on different roles there? I mean, Cupps is relatively similar, but it's a little bit easier to be the point guard running the show when you're passing the ball to Khalil Ware than when you're passing it to Peyton Sparks. That's not a knock on Sparks. They're obviously very different players. And so you're putting those guys in situations where they're surrounded by better players. They're able to feel a little bit less pressure to actually produce in some of those scenarios where we talked about this with Gunn so many times. Like, somebody's got to take shots with the second unit. He feels compelled to be that guy. But the quality of the shots he's getting in those scenarios is not the quality of the shots he's going to get when he's getting kickouts from Malik Renu and Khalil Ware and things like that. And I think, the other one is especially, and this is true, probably more of a guy like Cupps who, even when he's playing with X, like, does he feel compelled to defer to him as the, older guy, even if they want the ball in Gabe's hands when they're together, to let X play off the ball a little bit? It just, I think it's pretty easy to be deferential as a player to a guy who's been around that long and who is the captain of the team and, the leader and those things. I think it's easy to kind of sit back and think, well, he'll create something. He can make something happen. And you don't have that crutch anymore. So I think it's a reasonable argument, but it, like you said, it doesn't mean that they don't need him and, anything like that. But I do think it forces things to be different. And realistically, things are going to happen. Guys are going to get in foul trouble. I think that's a positive for what you need to be able to be prepared for later in the season. If X gets 2 fouls, you can't go take you're not taking all 5 guys out. You got to figure out how to integrate these different pieces. And everybody hates the line changes and all that stuff. And I do too. And this kind of provides at least a little bit of a backup for why, maybe you don't want to do that. And it speaks a little bit to what Coach said about how you're trying to figure out how to play, playing 9 or 10 guys is tough. And this has taken one of those pieces out. And now you're playing 8, kind of 9, depending upon how many minutes you want to give to Sparks or whoever that 9th guy tends to be on that day. And it makes it a little bit easier to divvy that stuff out.
Coach, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, there is no substitute for court time during games. You can practice all you want. You can come in the gym, and you need to come in the gym. You need to work that, but you need to have court time. And what you're seeing with Gabe Cupps playing and CJ Gunn and Caleb Banks with a lesser rotation. Now, would I want that to be no X? No, I think X is needed for this basketball team. I think X playing a certain way is needed for this basketball team, to be honest with you. And when he comes back, we need to see that. But yeah, you don't. But it's such a great opportunity now. So when X comes back, these guys have had game minutes in pressure situations. Caleb Banks in the Louisville game helped win a game that was a must-win. And then he's coming back and doing some really nice things. Why? He's getting time on the court. And it's the coach's toughest thing. Like, you have your starters. You want to play them 29, 30, 32 minutes, and you still got to play to develop your team too. And sometimes guys only get 10 or 11 minutes, and they got to be productive in those 10 or 12 minutes. That's not enough time to really get a lot of experience. So it's a tough thing for coaches, the rotation. And that's why I like 8 or 9, because that, and you get into a flow. And again, when Gabe Cupps plays with the starters, he doesn't need to score, and so he can play better. When C.J. Gunn comes in and he's playing with the 3 starters, then he's not as paid attention to by the defense, and he can be open and relax and hit shots. So hopefully we get away from this one sub for everyone and end up with 4 or 5 subs on the bench. I just don't think that works. I think it hasn't worked for years. Last year we didn't have 10, so they went away from it for a little bit. But you don't want a 6-year starter to be hurt. You just don't. But it has resulted in better offense right now, and maybe that's what the coaches had to adjust, the players had to adjust, and now we bring X back and we're even better because of all of this experience. It's a growing experience, and that's just the way you have to look at it.
Andy, last one from Drew. He said, what are some lineups we haven't used that you would like to see? And I know Coach kind of mentioned some of this, and we've hit around it with some of the bench talk, but are there any sets of 5 guys that you'd love to see play together?
I mean, I don't know that I probably know what ones have or haven't played. I think in a general sense, wouldn't mind seeing a little bit of what Mbaka with the 4 might look like, whether that's with Ware or with Renu at the 5. I think that's one would like to see a little bit of. And then I don't know. That's probably the biggest one I at least like to see. I haven't looked enough to know who's done what, but I think ultimately any answer that somebody gives is going to be a little bit more mixing and matching with some of the bench guys and the starters and trying to figure out how to mesh that together.
Yep.
Yeah, interesting too. I think Mbako at the 4 would be better for him defensively. More, less likely to be out on a perimeter guy. Those types of things. But we're not probably going to see that. When I go down, they have post workouts in the pregame, and then they have perimeter, and Banks and Mbako are working with the perimeters, not even working inside. So I think we're not going to see that. I would like it. I agree with you, Andy. But if they're working perimeter stuff, and so when you have your practice and you break down perimeters and post, I would believe that Banks and Mbako are playing the 3, and that's where they're going to go. But yet you've seen some of it at times, multiple times. You saw it in the Michigan game. You had C.J. Gunn, Cupps, and you had Galloway out there when they went offense for defense late and took Mbako out of the game. You saw a little more 3-guard lineup. And so it's there, and I think they're aware of it, and I think they know that it's beneficial at times. And so the question is, are we going to see that more than just in certain situations? Right now, there's really no backup for that, to be honest, if you put C.J. Gunn out there as typical guards, unless you put I don't think you'll see Banks and Mbako with the point guard. I don't think you'll see that combination. So I would love to see it. I've been clamoring for smaller basketball for a long, long time. When Andy, when you and I watch as much basketball as we watch, we see a lot of it. Doesn't mean it's right, and maybe it's not right for Indiana, but those are some of the suggestions I would make.
Well, Coach, you're a fan of Buddy Ball U now, so you just need to get used to it, because if Derek Queen comes next year, going to be a whole lot of Derek Queen and Malik Renu playing Buddy Ball down there, and it's going to be impossible to stop, but it's going to have its own, drawbacks.
There's nothing wrong with that. Put 3 guards out there with 2 Buddy Balls.
Yeah. No, I know.
And again, I'm not trying to be negative about any of our players. I like Caleb Banks. I think he's going to be special, at least in his role, and I think Mbako's going to be special. But to me, those guys are almost more 4s than they are 3s, and we're trying to force feed those guys into perimeters. And Banks is maybe more of a perimeter, but, anyway.
No, ideally
it is what it
for
is.
Banks,
and
it's to play 4 and be able to drive, bigger 4s and really use his athleticism. Yeah. So, no, it's – look, we've got a lot of interesting players, but only 5 can play at a time, and so it's interesting. We knew all offseason that there were going to be, issues mixing and matching and making it make sense. So this is not surprising. All righty, folks, that is going to do it for us on this week's edition of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. Thank you to Bob Thompson for producing our music. Thank you to John Ringer of Rig Design for designing our logos. And thank you to Jim Hansen for joining us and doing such a great job with his Auburn preview. And thank you, of course, for listening. We'll be back on Saturday after the IU-Auburn game. Until then.
Take it from me, Robert Johnson. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out.
Shoot the ball.
Here I come. This is Don Sony.
Wise words, Andy. Do you need to bounce? There was one other question I was going to address here.
Yeah, I gotta run. I'm sure you guys can handle it.
You're out Saturday, right?
No, I'm good.
You're good. Someone was out. Well, I don't know.
I had a hard out at 5. I had to be on the road at 5,
okay.
so I can just sit out if you got everyone.
No, I'll see. I'm not sure what Ryan's availability is, but good. No,
okay.
we at least
I gotta bounce off on Saturday at 5.
Okay.
Brent is coaching over at Western where I used to coach.
Nice.
So I'm going to drive over there, and he starts at 6, and it's about a 45-minute drive. So I want to make sure I get there.
Nice.
To watch
you got to get there.
Coach against my former team.
Yeah, you're going to start heckling him before the game, right? That's ultimately what you got to do, right?
Here's what's wrong with my son. My son's a little frickin' Lou Holtz. Like, he tells me, Dad, there's no numbers. I got a bunch of freshmen. I have no guards on the JV. The coach took – and the varsity's playing 3 freshmen and a sophomore, and he's the JV coach. So I thought, oh, my God, I'm going to go watch some really bad basketball. He's 4-0. He's 4-0.
Awesome. He's a Tom Sony, man.
Do not complain. I know, but he's sitting there bad-mouthing, struggling, crying. Oh, Dad, I'm going to be a tough season. You're going to have to help me. I'm like, dude, you're 4-0. Shut up. Buy me some beer. Let's go.
You dumbass.
That's exactly what he is.
All right, I'll talk to you guys this Saturday.
I love him, and I'm proud of him being a dumbass.
That's funny.
Sorry, Brent, if you're listening.
I want to make one quick point here to the chat mob. And, we love our chat mob. I take it as a great source of pride. I know you do, Coach. I know Andy and Ryan does, and all the people who are moderators, that, we can come to the chat, which is free and public, and lots of different people can join, and we have good conversations. And as you know, we've been doing this show for 12, 13 years now. We have no problem offering criticism of the way that guys play. There's a way to do that, and there's also a way not to do that, and there's also a way not to try and engage in a conversation with a community. And so I just have very little patience for people who come into the chat and have a certain point that they want to make and are belligerent about it and don't listen to what other people say, countering their point. Because in that instance, you're not here to be part of a conversation. You're just here to express some agenda that you have and badmouth a certain player, and I just don't have time for it. And so that's the kind of stuff, I think we're going to get a little bit more willing to ban or put people in timeouts when that happens. It doesn't necessarily mean you've said anything like wrong, but it just kills the flow of the conversation when everybody has to deal with that. So I just think it's important. This is a community. These are conversations. If you're going to come in here and say stuff, you have to be willing to listen. So that kind of stuff just drives me up the wall, because it's, 99.9% a really good conversation, but you can get 1 or 2 people that really derail it. And our job is to protect it for the 99.9%, not the people who come in and don't want to listen and participate in a conversation. So that's just a fair warning for everybody moving forward, because the chat mob needs to be a place where people can come and really enjoy and have a good conversation. A healthy debate, back and forth. We love the debates, and you can have opinions that may be a little bit out here as long as you defend them and acknowledge, what other people say back to you. But I just want to make that clear, and we're going to start taking action on that if it continues.
And Jared, if I just real quick, I thought there were good arguments on both sides, to be honest with you, and I see a lot of that. Just make sure we're doing it and acknowledging that the other person has the right to disagree with us. That's all we're asking. But
exactly.
It is an interesting dilemma. The big question in the chat is interesting, and I see both sides, and I try to be veiled and comfortable or quiet too in how I get to a point. But I kind of saw both sides of that argument and probably lean one way that most of the chat mob might not like, to be honest with you, in that. But everyone's opinion is fair, and we need to agree to disagree at some point, and then just drop it and get back to the other stuff that we all agree on, and that Indiana's 7-1 and got some decent players making some improvements. That's what we all agree on. So disagree, listen, and then get back to, making fun of Coach Tonsoni or something like that. That's half the fun in the chat mob too.
Let's see. There was one other question I wanted to get to.
Hey, Ziggy wasn't here. By the way, talking about chat mob from the other night, Ziggy wasn't here. I was all ready with my resume. He was asking about my qualifications. So Ziggy, if anyone knows who Ziggy is out there, hit me up. I'd love to talk about the 8 different ways to guard ball screens. And then maybe you can understand where my resume was, Ziggy. 21 years of high school basketball. Doesn't matter where you coach. But, I'd love to hear your opinion, on all your offense and how you would coach and how you would do that, because I imagine your resume is just as good as mine, is what I'm gathering.
I like feisty coach.
I wasn't gonna get after Ziggy at all. I was just gonna let Ziggy go. But once you started talking about the chat mob needs to be better, yeah. All right, Ziggy. I'll share my resume. Awesome. Yeah. I lost a lot of games, Ziggy. Lost a lot of games. Won a lot of games. Was 1 game away from a state championship. It was a hell of a run. Love to talk to you about it. You can buy me a beer.
All right, I got to pull some drops from that for sure. Okay, last question from Philip. IU's new football coach appears to be a great hire. He has the ability to turn a program around and make them winners. My question is, how long will he stay at IU if he's offered a higher profile job? So I have 2 thoughts on this. One, Coach Cignetti is 62 years old, which is, getting older. But coaches are coaching a lot longer. He's coached at the highest levels. I would not be shocked, if he comes into Indiana and has 3 or 4 really good years and gets offered by a bigger school, like taking Auburn, for example. If they're just struggling and they're like, hey, we don't need a young coach. Let's just find someone who can turn this thing around and get us back to winning right now. I could see him getting offered a job and potentially taking it because he's a guy who thrives on challenges. And, once you turn Indiana around and get the thing going, there's a long way for Indiana to go to get better, but there's also a ceiling on how good Indiana could be, so I could see that. But my second part of that question is, I would not worry about that at all. If Cignetti does a good enough job at Indiana to get a better job, that would be amazing. Even if it's 2 seasons, that would be incredible. It would make the job more attractive to the next coach. And so if it happens, awesome. If it doesn't happen, awesome. I'm excited about Cignetti. I like, his vision. We'll have to see if he can actually win. But if it's that good, then I'll take it. There would be no issues there, and it would not mean, Dolson should have hired a younger guy. No. Scott Dolson needed to hire someone to win football games over the next 2 or 3 years. That was the job. And I think he did it, but we'll see. It's all going to be about the, actual wins.
And I wouldn't be surprised if he's here to stay. He said he had a contract and he could have retired. So that obviously was on his mind to coach out that contract or at least, maybe get another extension or 2, but stay at James Madison. And the way it sounded like he had a contract ready to go, whether it was current or they were going to extend him to the point where he was going to retire. He comes in here and changes this around. I mean, look what's happened at Northwestern and look what's happened at Iowa and Wisconsin. When those programs were way down, Barry Alvarez comes in and he ends up building that program and then staying. It might even be better with an older coach. Because you're like, man, I don't want to, I got it going here. I got 8-9 years, right? I'm 61, 62. I got 8-9 years. I want to coach till I'm 70 or whatever, and I'm winning, and I've turned this thing around, and I'm challenging the big dogs. Do I really have that energy to go and spend 3 or 4 more years rebuilding? And if you're winning here, the pressure's off too. You're going to some of those other schools, so it could be either way. Let's just get this thing started. I can't believe it, Jared. I renewed my football tickets.
Yes.
I put a deposit down. I got 2 extra tickets for the first 2. I took advantage of that before December. Brent and I are already making plans. I actually looked up flights to Los Angeles for the UCLA game. Like I had gone to 2 games, but this dude, one, he's Italian.
That's right.
Like that's all you. I know Donardo, so you can.
Yeah.
We had a bad Italian. Now we got the good Italian coming in. Let's go.
Let's go.
A little spaghetti for a tail. I'm gonna make spaghetti for a tailgate. A little lasagna, pasta, Italian sausage. Yep. I got the menu going.
To answer this question, as long as Curt Cignetti wins games over the next 2 or 3 years, Indiana makes at least a couple bowl games over the next 2 or 3 years, whatever happens after that is totally fine. Totally fine.
Absolutely.
Take it all. All right. Any final thoughts here before we wrap up, Coach? You want to insult any other family members while you're on the air tonight?
No, I will make an announcement. We still got about 160 in. I'm going to be a grandpa. It was officially announced. We've known for a while. A little Hoosier is on the way.
That's right.
I'm going to have a little granddaughter in March, I think in late March, and so we are already going to indoctrinate her in Indiana. Her mom is kind of a Notre Dame football fan, so I don't know how that's going to go, but we're going to –
reversible onesies, I guess?
Yeah, reversible onesies. So now I tell you what, Mrs. Tonsoni, not chasing me around. She's chasing the Amazon guy around because she's ordering all kinds of stuff.
That's awesome.
I may need to be in a transfer portal and try to get some NIL money, up my NIL money just to cover all the grandma purchases that are being made in our house right now.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks to everyone in the chat mob. You got any advice? Dale, we'll talk at a baseball game out in the outfield. You got to give me some advice on what I need to do. This is all new to me.
That's so great.
So
great. Happy for you. You got your mug? Show everybody your mug.
Yeah.
Is it still there?
So this is how they shared a couple months ago. They gave us these in August as gifts, surprised us, so we knew. We had to hide them because he didn't want Brent to know. He didn't want any other family members to know. It was just the parents, grandparents to be. So we had to hide our mugs for a while, and now it's on assembly call. But
that's right.
They publicly announced it on social media just the other day. So we're excited.
That's awesome.
Very, very excited. It's again, you gotta do some good things. And this is, again, I'll tell this, I say it to Jared all the time. Like, Jared is one of the best at helping people out. He's helped me out. He's helped our interns out. I know he helps his family out. Like, this is why we believe in this community. It's about what you do for others. And so many of you in the chat mob mean so much to us as hosts. I hope you know that it goes two ways, that we look forward to the chat and all that stuff. But just do good stuff, man, and good stuff comes back to you. So, yeah. Christmas tree's up. I had dinner with one of my classes tonight, ethnic studies. We had dinner together. They want to hang out with this old guy. Life's good, so be kind. Be nice, be decent, love each other. Ooh, I didn't say that, did I?
That's still okay.
That's still good advice, right?
It's still good advice.
It's still good advice. Good night, everybody. I can keep talking. I'm so fired up. I could keep on talking.
Oh, that's awesome.
Don't want to do that.
All right.
See you.
Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you guys on Saturday.